For some gamers, it is not enough to just casually enjoy a game, play decently, or hang with the boys. Some crave more. They push games to its absolute limit, diving into speedrunning, climbing the ranked ladders, or even going pro. One game that naturally attracts that kind of dedication is Trackmania. A game that consists of many tricks and needs very precise inputs to conquer and compete in the top. So what are the infamous tricks that you have to learn? In this video, I will go over every single trick that you need to know of with the stadium card. With mastering these tricks and game mechanics, players have been able to find countless shortcuts, and sometimes even within the main game's campaign, which are maps that are usually carefully crafted so they can't be cut. With pushing the game to its absolute max, some of the world records have become almost unbeatable. If you're interested in speedrunning aspects, or you want to step up your Trackmania gameplay, let me show you the world of insane tricks and techniques and how to get started. So let's start with the basic that every player needs to know and implement. And though some of these tricks are very simple, they have a big outcome on your gameplay. After that, I will cover the kind of tricks that make you beat maps that let you look like an absolute pro. So let's get started. Let's start with the easiest but also the most used and important trick. Most often when you get to jump, you should air brake. It will make your car steady and will stop it from rotating your front tires, also known as the term nose, downwards mid-air, and even helps you land faster. All you have to do is hit the brake button real fast and let go just as fast, as soon as all wheels are in the air. This seems like a small thing, but it has a big outcome on your gameplay. Sometimes using the air brake is slower for a jump. Instead, you can use the flow trick, which means right before you jump, you steer left and then right to rotate your car. It will make your car land faster in a tilted way. As you can see in this case, compared to the air brake, you have more speed. At the beginning of a race, move slightly to the side and then straighten out just before hitting a booster to gain additional speed. On some tracks, you will encounter a turn where you can't just full speed through it, and this is where drifting comes in handy. Maps with a lot of tight turns on the road surface are known as tech maps, really rely on drifting. You have to start steering into the turn a while before the turn itself and then apply the brakes to it as well. It will make your car drift around the corner, which is faster than slowing down or braking. However, it will also push the car a bit outside. So you have to find out what line works the best to get the most optimal exit. The minimum speed for drift starts at 200 speed. Also important, if you carry skid marks after a drift, you can't drift again. You need to straighten up your car first. While testing, it showed that in the late third gear, around 190 speed, it started to be possible to start the drift. As a beginner, getting the timing for that is relatively hard. It is more reliable and easier in gear 4 or at least 200 speed. Another but more advanced drift is the Neo drift. The trick is more known as a Neoslide, which is very helpful in very tight corners where a normal drift is simply not possible, since you can't steer long enough before the turn. You can also utilize it when you go slower than you usually have to for normal drift, which is below 190 speed. With a Neoslide, you go for normal drift, but then you release brake and steering to then quickly press them again. It tightens the drift and pushes the back of your car more into the turn. On some maps, you will be presented with a little rounded plastic Wallride. The key is to learn how to enter this turn so your car will drive smooth without bouncing. Right before the turn, start steering into the direction of the Wallride and place your car parallel to the wall. The entry point can differ from map to map, and sometimes you have to aim for the crease of the turn. While you get your smooth drive, you will actually be faster if you steer into the turn instead of into the wall. On the dirt surface, it is important to not slide too much and keep your wheels in line, since it will really slow you down. It will punish you way more than on the road surface. So when you turn and you keep your wheels perfectly in line, resulting in 2 skid marks instead of 4, you're doing a Noseslide. You can usually utilize the Noseslide in wider dirt turns. Important to notice, when you drive on dirt, try not to steer whenever you're about to have a gear change, which can be seen using a dashboard plugin, which can be installed through a software called OpenPlanet, or listening to the sound of the engine about to rev up. Keeping the highest gear on dirt will give you a big speed advantage. As a beginner, driving on ice for the first time seems really uncontrollable, but there's simple tricks to learn that make it actually really fun. I'd say it's easy to learn, but really hard to master, which goes with like almost every trick in this game. So when you encounter ice in this game, you often have to ice slide through the corners. Basically, what you got to do is steer in the direction where you want to go, and when your car has turned around 90 degrees, you have to counter steer, so the opposite direction, and hold the steering input while pressing acceleration. The car will straighten out on its own at some point, however, you can control that by releasing your steering or the acceleration. If you realize your ice slide is too wide, you can tap the brake and tighten the turn. Play around until you get a feel for it. Sometimes during an ice slide, you will lose grip and your car will slide out. It has to do with your car gear changing in that moment, and it can often feel really random to the player. However, certain Big Bird made a video about that, showing how and when you steer in between a certain area, you will actually be fine and the gear change won't slide out your car. To understand more of this, please watch his video. On dirt, there's also a little trick that if you have icy tires from being on ice or snow before driving on dirt, you can slide while driving and steering into a turn, and it gives you a speed boost. The same applies to sand, but is rarely ever seen. On some ice tracks, you have to spin your car in a 360-degree turn. On this weekly short map, for example, you start with kind of a regular ice slide, making it tighter than usually, and after sliding to the right, to continue the motion to the left, you let your car over-rotate, and when you turn 180 degrees, you start steering right. It will result in your car keeping your car's motion going, and you end up with a nice little spin. As mentioned in my last video, when jumping into an ice slide, you can try to go for the gorilla grip, where all you have to do is set up your car to land sideways and already start steering for the ice slide while in the air before you land. It results in you just instantly ice sliding. On a lot of 4-speed maps, you will at some point not progress even with perfect lines if you don't go for speed slides, which are basically turning your car in a way that the skid marks overlap. To start the skid marks, you will probably drive over dirt or grass and steer while leaving it to make your car slide a bit. Or you oversteer at over 600 speed. To overlap the skid marks means that the skid mark from your front tires overlap with the ones from your back tires. Depending on the speed you're going, you want to have more or less overlapping. A good mark to go with is at 550 speed, you want to overlap roughly 50%, and the faster you go, the more you want to overlap. There's some really good practice maps explaining and helping you learn it. The next trick is very similar to speed slides. However, to start the skid marks, you hit the brake really quick to initiate the speed for drift. To do that, you must have at least 420 speed. The rest of the trick is the same as the speed slides before. You have to overlap your skid marks according to your speed. You can also do speed slides when going backwards, and you will mostly see it on dirt, plastic or grass. Here you want to keep a small gap in between your skid marks and not overlap them. When you go backwards, obviously the steering inputs are reversed. This trick is pretty much only needed if you're hunting for a world record. A quantum slide comes down to also being a Noslide, but in a bit of a different case. You must have around 200 speed, or the car has to be in late 3rd gear or higher while driving on dirt or grass. At those speeds, you can speed slide on those surfaces. Now combine both together and you got a quantum slide. At those speeds, you actually gain speed compared to doing a Noslide under 200 speed, which gains you none. The name quantum slide is a bit controversial, since some people argue it's just a perfect Noslide. There are 4 types of wiggle in the game. All of them are pretty similar. Just the speed in which you swap the steering makes a difference. On plastic, dirt and grass, you will drive forward and change steering from left to right pretty fast. Compared to just driving straight, you see the car just speeding off, even though it seems counterintuitive. Lastly, the ice wiggle, which is more of a double tap on both directions. It is also sadly the only trick in this video I can't do myself, so I'm using a player's ghost for it. But in general, wiggles are actually just very short tiny speed slides added onto each other. You can also wiggle driving backwards on dirt, grass and plastic, and it does a big difference. Once again, you just steer from one side to the other. The angle here is very important, and sometimes it is faster to do a Noslide. On some campaign maps, you may have seen some crazy world records where people use the reactor physics to get airtime through some kind of ledge, and when flying close to the ground, you get a really fast reactor zoop. Controlling the car while flying is a bit tricky though, and just takes a bit of practice and figuring it out. Some counter-steering is involved, and also trying to not oversteer and just use tiny taps. In general, flying with the reactor instead of driving is way faster. The reactor zoop tends to happen when you have the reactor and your car gets close to the ground. Now that I have covered the more basic techniques, let's go into the more advanced mechanics, and the one bridge for that is a pretty common trick called the Bugslide. When carrying a lot of speed and having a wide turn on grass, plastic or dirt, you can turn your car sideways 90 degrees towards the road, and right before you land, you have to hold accelerate, brake and steer towards the turn, and hold those inputs until you want to end the Bugslide. The current spring campaign of 2025 had a map that consists of multiple Bugslides, which is very uncommon for a campaign map. It is fair to mention it does work on road, but it's tighter and way slower. With the same Bugslide inputs, you can also go for a Flingbug, in which your car won't land with the wheels on its surface, but just with the back wheels, having the front tires aim up the air. If done correctly, you can get an insane fling and you can fly pretty high for a very long time. We keep going with the same inputs, and when having your car in a sideways angle and bug sliding into a wall, your car can get launched into the air, and it's called an Uberbug. Nowadays, it's often seen on plastic surfaces with plastic balls, since in general, you can bounce a lot easier on plastic. As you can tell by now, a lot of tricks consist of the same input. The difference is just on how your car lands, or what surface you're driving on, and which speed you have. So when landing with your nose down, which means your front tires, you can get a Nosebug. While in the air, you let your car turn until it hits a 90-degree angle and is pretty much straight up. And you use the Bugslide inputs, so accurate brake and steering, to get a motion towards where you're steering. Now let's combine the last few tricks I talked about. If you do the just explained Nosebug on an elevated plastic surface with the same inputs, you can also get a trick called an Uber Nosebug. Since on this map, the plastic part has an angle, the car is flung over the plastic ramp, resulting in a catapult-like effect. On dirt, it is possible to drive on a curved inward wall. The tires get a good grip, and when having the car's front wheels slightly angled towards where you're driving, it will keep going forward. Compared to normal road wall rides, you actually don't have to carry a lot of speed because of how the dirt grip works. You can also technically wall ride on ice, which is super rare, but it's possible, so I want to cover it. You want to wiggle your car from the wall side up down to the floor to get a little swing up to the wall. While the car is pretty straight up with the wall, you can drive for a bit, steering into the direction you want the car to go, and then put in a little brake tap, which results in the car ice sliding over the wall. Knowing how to turtle can be really useful since it has saved a lot of people's runs. You can flip your car on its back, and while it's still moving, you can put in the gas and steering input so you can turtle, since one of the wheels gets grip on the road and will keep driving. When you start to turtle, if the left wheel touches the ground, you steer right, and so on. If the car is fast enough, you can also only use one side steering input to keep moving forward. You can use a turtle to also unturtle and get back onto your front tires. To do that, you must turtle up onto a wall, for example, and make it so that the most far away tires from the wall go upwards and touch the wall by steering into it. You can also do a backwards turtle when driving backwards. When your left tire hits the ground, you steer left, and when the right one hits the ground, you steer right. These are definitely harder since you have less speed when going backwards. You have to consistently steer at the correct time, which is when your car is the most tilted. The one most dance-looking trick in Trackmania is the Spinderella trick, and it is when your car is spinning on its front tires, looking like it's spinning like a ballerina. When you have high speeds, you have to air brake to keep the car with its nose down in a 90-degree angle. You can keep pressing gas, and you use precise steering inputs to make your car spin around in circles on its front wheels. When the car slows down eventually, the spins will fade out more and more. Some maps set up the Spinderella for you using the reactor, for example, and the car spins on its own. However, I think it makes sense to understand how the trick works with raw inputs for then using it on more simpler maps, but understanding the trick a bit more. Even one of our most favorite superheroes is represented as a trick in the game. When driving straight forward on a wall with the road surface and steering away from the direction you want to go, your car gets a weird grip and slowly slides off the wall. When jumping, an air brake will help getting the car in a straight position. You can also do this by having a slight angle towards the wall, holding brakes and steering to the left, like in this case. Though I think the first approach might be the slower one, but definitely the one that is easier, though it might not always work. Some similar effects come from when jumping towards a wooden wall. You want to steer the car in a way that one wheel would touch the wall, and then steer away from the wall. The tire gets a weird grip on the wood surface and the car can drive off. It results in a little jump-looking motion. You might have heard of an engine off block before. When driving over this, your car's engine will turn off and all you got is your speed you have left to carry you further. But with certain techniques, this block can be skipped. Though it's not always useful, some maps require this to be finished. One way is to get your car in an upside down position through a turtle and drive towards the edge of a road, where it's shown with an about 45-degree angle and steering away from the wall as soon as you hit it. Doing this correctly, your car will get hooked and the car lifts up with only the hooked wheel touching the ground anymore. While the wheel is hooked, it's also still able to accelerate and move the car forward. Unturtle again after the block and you skip the engine off. Another way is to slide over the engine off while the car is sideways or when the car is on its back. But the tires can't hit the engine off block, since them touching it is what triggers the effect. As shown on this kacky map, you also start a turtle. You have to get enough speed. Right before the engine off, you have to steer into the side where your wheels are lifted and add the brakes. This results with the car sliding onto its side, and since it's down on the slight downward angle, the car will keep sliding on one of its wheels, which results in the car not getting the engine off. When hitting different surfaces, you can get a bounce. It often works when turning your car upside down, like in this clip. You bounce off the pipe and you can hit the finish from underneath, which is called a Bugfin. It is also possible from the side of the finish, since the line actually exceeds the outside of the finish block as well. This was carried from Trackmania nations, where people now have made custom finish blocks to recreate this bug. In the vanilla finish block from Trackmania 2020, the Bugfin actually is not possible and doesn't exist. When you drive on top of a finish or checkpoint, you can get your car stuck and steer into the middle of the block with adding brakes. This will result in you bogging through the floor and getting the checkpoint or the finish. When encountering a thin grass block, you're able to clip your front tires in it and often flick your car out of it, being able to fly. You can steer your car while the tires are clipped. To get the flick, you add the brake input. So what you have to do is aim for your front tires to be slightly above the grass so they get clipped. This also works with any kind of really thin block. I personally only encountered this with grass. I just remembered it also works with your back tires, and I have encountered it with other blocks.